A little girl was visiting a beautiful cathedral with her aunt, and it was late afternoon, and the sun's rays were streaming through the stained glass window that featured the figures of several saints. The little girl pointed to one of the figures standing out in the warm orange glow of the strong sunlight and asked, "Who is that?" So, "That's St. Peter," the aunt replied. Then pointing to another, the girl asked that who that one was. And "That's St. John," was a reply. And when she pointed to another, she was told that that was St. James. Then the little girl, with a sigh of understanding and satisfaction, the little girl said, "Well, now I know what a saint is. A saint is somebody the light shines through." A saint is somebody the light shines through. Today we are remembering one impressive saint who radiated the light of Christ. A couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to visit his sanctuary in Cartagena, Colombia, on the Atlantic coast. Saint Peter Claver was born in Spain in 1580, and he became a Jesuit and volunteered to go to South America as a missionary. For 40 years, he ministered to the black slaves in what is now Colombia. Colombia was a huge human trafficking market for the slave trade. On the journey to America, 1/3 of the future slaves died of disease, dehydration, and maltreatment. Whenever a ship arrived, Peter would take medicine, food, and clothing to it. He nursed to the slaves in the warehouses who were awaiting their sale and taught them about God as he poured healing balm on their wounded bodies and souls. He baptized nearly 300,000 blacks. On the day of his solemn profession, he signed himself slave of the slaves forever. So after being sick from the epidemic and worn out from his work, Peter was bedridden for 4 years before he died. In today's first reading, we hear St. Paul telling us, "I became a slave to all so as to win over as many as possible." And the gospel reminds us that the blind person cannot lead the blind. We need the light of Christ to shine through us. Like athletes in a competition, let us not be distracted from our goal of winning as many as possible by sharing the love and light of Christ every day. In the United States and elsewhere today, Knights of St. Peter Claver, we welcome African American men and their families to continue the mission of St. Peter Claver to the needy and poor. St. Peter Claver said, "Seek God in all things, and you shall find God by your side." Like St. Peter Claver, Jesus invites us to seek God in all things. And as the little girl said, we may be just like the saints and radiate the light of Christ shining through us to others. How do we do that? By seeking to find God in simple acts of compassion, patiently listening to people or those who are troubled, maybe our friend or our neighbor, or visiting a sick colleague in a hospital, comforting a family in mourning or at wake service or a funeral mass. When you let your light shine, make sure it radiates the warm, loving light of Christ. Amen. And George did that. Thank you.